There, this is Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial video will show you how to paint this St. Patrick's Day gnome. This is the fourth in a series of gnome paintings that I have done, and we are doing this on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. You'll need a 3/4 inch flat wash brush or a similar size large flat brush, and the colors titanium white and light blue permanent. We are going to paint the entire background of this painting first. So you will need to dip your wash brush in the water and load it in both the blue and the white. So when you apply the paint to the canvas, you're going to do all up and down vertical strokes using the full width of the brush. And we're going to have that blue and white kind of blend together, but leave it so that it doesn't mix all the way. Now, I forgot to mention, when we first dipped our brush in the water, we kind of distributed that water within the paint, and that is going to allow it to be kind of thin. So when I'm applying this paint, it's not super thick. The water has thinned it down a bit. I'm going up and down strokes like I mentioned before, and I'm trying not to let the blue and white mix all the way because I want to have the kind of an unblended two-toned look in the sky. Now, if you want, you can just have it blend all the way and be a super light blue. So if you want it that way, that's okay. If you didn't want to do the white, you can change the colors up. You can do all solid blue throughout the whole canvas. So you can always get creative with these tutorials and change up the colors. My video is going to speed up a little bit here, but take your time as you fill up this entire canvas. So you want to go all the way to the bottom, all the way to the top. And if you're working on a stretched canvas, you can paint the sides the same color as well. You can always dip your brush in a teeny bit of water, but when you do that, just make sure you distribute it into the paint because too much water will cause the paint to start dripping down on the canvas, and we don't want that. We want our paint to stay a nice thin consistency throughout the background. When you're done with the background, you're going to need to let it dry. You can take a break and come back, or you can get a hair dryer and dry the entire painting. So mine is dry at this point, and I am going to show you how to draw the gnome. If you would like to use my Traceable, you are welcome to. It is a free Traceable that I provide. You can print it out. It's optimized for this size canvas, and you can use graphite transfer paper to transfer it. I'm going to show you how to draw the gnome. So I like to draw my objects with pencil when I do paintings. And so I've drawn these gnomes before. It pretty much is the same steps if you've not drawn the gnome yet. So I'll show you step by step. But I always start with the nose. The nose is like an oval shape nose. And then from there, I start building my gnome. And then I do the bottom part of the hat. So it's kind of a wavy line that kind of hugs over the top of his nose. And then it kind of creates sort of a shape with the bottom part of his hat. And then I do the top part of his hat. So this gnome's hat is going to be nice and tall, and it's going to dip down to kind of a point. If you wanted your hat to not dip down, you can just have it go all the way to the top and go to a point. And then from there I do the beard. So the beard is directly under the nose, it's the same width of the hat. And then I just kind of sketch out what I want that beard to be. It's got these sort of pointed points from the hair, and then this beard's going to kind of go down into a point, kind of like a triangular shape. And then I kind of sketch out his body, so I can be very basic at first. So he's got a robe, so I can kind of sketch out the robe. and not worry about his arms just yet. Just sketch out the length of his robe, and then I can kind of guess where his arms are going to be. So this guy's arm over here on the right is just going to be down into his side. He's not going to be holding anything in this hand. But this one is a little tricky. He's going to be holding a pot of gold in this. So his arm is actually going to be kind of sticking out, but holding this pot of gold in his kind of elbow and hand. So I'm going to draw the pot of gold first by drawing the top part of that line, and then kind of sketch out the shape of that pot. So kind of a rounded shape that goes under that diagonal line, and then I can take that diagonal line and create that into a shape. And then so that part, that little half circle that I drew above it, is kind of where that gold is going to be up and sticking out. We don't have to draw all the individual gold pieces because that'll get messy really fast with all that pencil mark, but just kind of get an idea of where that would be. And then I did his arm, so we have part of his arm kind of sticking out. And then his hand, we have his hand and his thumb, and that part is overlapping our pot. And that is where that hand is showing right there. So I could erase what is under it. So I drew the hand and then I erased all the lines underneath it. And then, so the thing about with drawing these with the painting is understand that it's a guideline. So when we paint it in, it can be adjusted. So for example, the robe, I'm going to kind of adjust that because I didn't really like the shape of the robe as I drew it, but knowing that I can change that as I paint, and that the pencil mark will erase later. And so for his shoes, I wanted to have these shoes be pointed this time around. So all my other gnomes have just simple ovals for the shoes. I decided to change this up a little bit and do the point. So it's the same kind of thing. So it's an oval, but this time it kind of goes around and goes to a point. And I started adjusting his robe, but I'm not going to do too much with it because too much pencil is going to get really messy really fast when we start painting in. So I am going to go ahead and start painting the gnome in, and I, for some reason, just like starting with the nose. And so the nose is the Unbleached Titanium color. I'll be using this number 4 round brush. I'm going to go ahead and simply paint that oval in with that color. And this is only the first layer, so if you paint this in and it doesn't have full coverage yet, or that blue's still showing through, know that we're going to do some shading and a couple coats over this nose later. But this is just the base work of that shape. Next, we're going to move on and do the beard. So this beard has the colors Cad Red Medium and Cad Orange Hue. And you can freshen up some titanium white if you need to. So what we're going to do is use a different brush. This is the number 8 round brush. And just because it's a bigger area, it would take longer to do it with that smaller brush. But I'm going to go ahead and mix that red and orange together. So it's going to make a red-orange color. And I'm going to paint the first layer of the beard. So it's going to look like a reddish-orange color. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint the shape in. I'm not going to worry about texture or anything like that right now. I'm just using this color to paint the shape in. And so when you are painting it in with the round brush, you could kind of get your strokes to contour. That just means that my strokes are moving in the direction of the shape. So right here I'm going around the nose, so I'm having my strokes kind of curve around the nose. And then right here we have all the edges, the pointed edges along the beard. I guess that's part of the texture, but I'm going to have my strokes go in that direction, and I'm just going to fill it all in and have my strokes kind of flow and go in that direction. So that's super helpful, even though it's all the solid same color right now, but it's kind of nice to get your strokes and kind of practice the direction that we're going to go in here, because when we start adding lighter colors to the beard, we're going to need to kind of make it go in certain directions. So there's my first layer, and we are going to go ahead and do a second layer with some texture strokes before this even dries. So we are going to get some titanium white, and I didn't rinse my brush off, so I still have that red orange color on my brush. Grab a little bit of white and a little bit more orange here. Basically, I'm just making kind of a lighter shade of that color, a lighter orange color. And then I'm going to go in and start painting kind of curved lines to represent the texture. And so I'm just taking my brush and doing kind of curved strokes, going in the direction that the hairs would be going. So right here, they'd be kind of going down and curved, and then along the bottom part. So I'm just doing kind of these curved, flowy lines. And you can see what's happening because we added that lighter color in there. It's already starting to create the texture and the depth of the hairs in the beard. And then we can take this a step further and add an even lighter coat. So I'm just grabbing a little bit more white on my brush there and kind of distributing it on my palette to make a slightly lighter tint of that orange. And then kind of the same thing. I'm going to go in there, add those lighter strokes of hairs in there, and we have our beard texture. You can even grab a little bit more white and add a few strokes of the super light pieces in there, but we don't want to cover up all the colors. We still see that very dark red first layer we did. We kind of see pretty much all the layers, and we didn't cover up any one single layer. So we are going to go ahead and move on to the next step. So that beard has a lot of paint on it. There's not really much I can do if I wanted to adjust it and add more texture because there's so much paint. It's just going to kind of all mush together. So if I wanted to do more to it, I'd have to kind of wait for that paint to dry. But we are going to go and start adding the green in the hat and the robe. So the color greens that I used for this are the Hooker's Green Hue and the light olive green. So basically I chose a light and a dark green. If you don't have these exact greens, you can find a different green. I just like working with two different colors because I don't ever like painting something one solid the same color. So I like to use a light and a dark when I'm filling objects in. I'm going to start with the darker green here, and this is that number 8 round brush, and I'm going to start with the bottom part of the hat. And these are contouring strokes because they're going in that direction. You can outline your shape and then fill it in by making your strokes kind of flow and go in that direction. And I'm just going to continue to paint that hat in this color, and I'll grab that lighter green here in just a second. So I just, when I grab the other color, I don't mix it all the way on your palette. I suppose you can, but I actually love doing it this way. I love having my colors blend on the canvas. So I have that lighter green, I have that darker green, and they're just kind of mixing and doing their thing. Our hat has, so you can see the direction of my strokes, they're going in a curved formation because that's what my hat would be doing. I wouldn't be painting all vertical strokes in here. You want to have your strokes go curved, going horizontally curved. But what you can do is what I'm doing right here. Use the tip of your brush to outline the shape of your hat. So you outline your shape, and then you can fill it in solid by going in your curved direction. And you're just kind of letting that darker green and lighter green kind of flow together. So outline the shape, fill it in by having your strokes curve in the direction of the hat. I'm not blending my dark and light green all the way. I'm leaving it so they're unblended. So we have parts of the hat that are with that lighter, parts of the hat that are darker, parts that kind of mix together, but the point is that it's not all solid the same color. And so I can go back later and add a second coat to this, but for now this is going to be my first coat, and I'm going to go ahead and start painting the bottom part of the robe in. Pretty much it's the same color, only this time my strokes are going kind of vertical in the direction of the robe. It'd be kind of flowy, but I'm still going to do the same thing with the dark green and the lighter green to kind of create two different kinds of greens in there. So this bottom part kind of drapes over his shoes, so I'm going to outline it that way, and then I'm just going to kind of fill it in that way as well, kind of having it go kind of flowy, going horizontal, and then kind of go vertical. Make sure that I go around the beard. If you paint over his beard, you can always let that green dry and then go back and do the edging of the beard again with the orange and red colors, so that's okay. I'm not going to paint over all of that pot area because I don't want to kind of lose where I drew that, but I am going to go ahead and paint his sleeve in over here on the right, and then I'll do his left sleeve. So right there I wanted to create that contrast of where that line is, so I used that darker green to kind of paint that line that divides his robe and where his sleeve is. And this sleeve kind of curves outward, and we don't really see much of anything else because we have the pot of gold, and the gold's kind of covering things as well, so we don't have to paint that in unless you want to, unless it feels more comfortable and makes more sense to you to paint the entire robe in and then do the gold. So that's up to you. Next, I'm going to rinse off that brush and grab two new colors. So I'm going to load my palette with some Mars Black and Burnt Umber. I will be using those colors to paint his shoes. So back to that number 4 round brush, that smaller brush, and his shoes are really dark colors, so I'm going to mix brown with black, probably a little more brown than black, so it's like a super dark brown color. Water it down slightly. This is that Artist Loft black, and I always have to water the Artist Loft brand black down for some reason because it's doesn't flow at all for me. So that's why I added water to it. Nice and flowy. And I'm just going to use that to outline the shape of his shoe and then fill it in solid. So this guy's got some pointy shoes. This part down here got cut off from the camera, but basically I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm outlining the shape of the shoe and I'm filling it in solid. Then I'm going to go back and add some green to my brush. So this is like a really dark green because I didn't rinse off my brush. So super dark green, and I'm going to use that dark green to kind of outline the bottom part of the robe. It got messy for me here because that brown wasn't dry and that brown ended up kind of mushing up into the robe, but I can always fix that later. But I just kind of redefined that bottom part of the robe to make it look like it's overlapping those shoes. Then I'm going to go ahead, rinse, dry. I'm going to add a second coat to the nose, and I'm going to do a little bit of shading on his nose as well. So with the Unbleached Titanium, I did a second coat, and then I'm grabbing some of the Burnt Umber color, and I'm adding that Burnt Umber just to the bottom part of the nose, and I'm blending it back up into the rest of the Unbleached Titanium color. So this is going to give the nose a little bit more depth, and you can even add a teeny pop of black in there. Just be super careful when you introduce black because it's pretty strong and kind of goes everywhere if you put too much. So we have that darker part of the nose, shadowy area on the bottom, and it kind of blends up. And then grabbing a little bit of black on that, I'm still using the number 4 on that brush, and I'm going to go ahead and paint that pot of gold in. So the beard and everything kind of in that area should be dry for the most part, enough for me to paint that area in. So I'm just going to slowly, gradually form this pot of gold that he's holding right now. I'm not worried about his hand and where his hand's going to be or where the rest of his arm is or where the gold is. I'm just kind of concentrating on getting the shape of this pot in. And so it's kind of at an angle. We drew that in earlier, and then we have the top rim piece is that sort of diagonal line up there, and then the bottom part is rounded. So I'm just filling that in solid black. And then we have that black band that goes on his hat, kind of like a leprechaun style hat. So I'm just taking that black and I'm just painting a striped area in. I'll go back over this. When this dries, I'll go back and add the gold piece that's in the middle of it. So you can customize the hat. I have my hat with the band and the gold piece, and then I added some white stripes to it. If you want to change the hat to a different sort of design, you are more than welcome to do that. Whatever way you like to do the painting. So I just kind of provide the steps, and you're always welcome to get creative and change things up. So we are going to go ahead and rinse and move on. I'm going to go ahead and paint his hand in. So we have this hand, super easy. It's just kind of on his side and maybe going kind of slightly behind his back. So that's that unbleached titanium color. And then I'm going to lighten his shoes up a bit with that unbleached titanium color. So I'm going to just paint a stroke of that color at the very top, grab some brown, and I'm just going to kind of apply that brown underneath it and kind of blend it in. So we have a lighter part of his shoe at the top and the darker part kind of at the bottom. Next, I'm going to add some lighter green to his robe. So rinsing, grabbing some of that lighter olive green color. I'm just going to kind of apply kind of a second coat in here. Add a little bit of white in that light olive green to lighten that green up. You don't have to do this, but kind of wanted to add a lighter green in this area since at the time it appeared kind of too dark for my liking. So I'm just going in there, kind of applying that lighter olive green as a second coat to the robe, but not covering up all the darker green in there. Add some kind of wavy lines for texture. Maybe there's some wrinkles in the robe, and just kind of filling it in. Then I'm going to rinse and dry my brush. The next thing I'm going to do is the layer of the gold that's in the pot. So the first layer was done with white. If I went in with gold, it would be too see-through. And I want it to be opaque and cover up this area over here. So I'm making little marks, little short strokes with the white, little oval shapes, kind of forming what that gold would look like, kind of making a pile right there on top of the pot. And then when this dries, I'll go back over it with gold. Then I'm going to take this white and start adding the highlight that's on this pot. So there's a white curved line over here on the right. I'm going to kind of dry brush that out, but didn't really mix very well. Adding a teeny bit of black to my brush is going to make that white turn more of a gray, so it'll look more dim. And I'm just doing kind of these expressive sort of strokes on the gold to make it look like it's kind of forming the shape of it. And I did a white line across the rim, but that's it. I'm just going to leave it kind of expressive and not really render it too much, but just enough to make it look like there's some light hitting that pot and it's not solid black. Then I could go ahead and do my hand if that black is dry all the way. Mine was. And this is the unbleached titanium, and I'm just painting his hand and his thumb to make it look like it's holding that pot. I did a second coat over his other hand, and I'll do another coat over that other hand after that coat dries. And so then I decided to go in here and fix up the beard. I mentioned earlier, when you did the coat, you may have painted some green over it. I'm just going to go ahead and add a second layer of like highlights to the beard with that lighter orange color and kind of concentrate on the edges here to make sure it looks like that beard is all overlapping the green robe. And not too much. You don't want to go too crazy in there and cover up all our dark shades of red in there. Next, we're going to go and do the gold buckle that's on the black stripe that we drew on his hat. So with the gold and a number 4 round brush, I'm just going to paint a square around this band here. This gold has pretty good coverage. It's not entirely opaque, but opaque enough to where it's going to cover that green and the black if I painted it over it. I can always wait for that to dry and add a second or third coat if I wanted it to be super opaque. But for now, this is okay. And then I can go in and start painting my little gold pieces in. So if that white's not dry all the way, it's okay if it mixes a little bit with that gold. That's okay. So I'm filling this in, but I'm actually not going to cover all of that white. I'm going to have little specks of that white kind of showing through, and it gives the gold kind of some more color and depth to it. Later on, I can go in and with the black and add some little black details to it, but for now, I'm going to not do that, but I am going to take my 4 round brush and black do some some outlining, starting with the bottom part under his head or under his hat above his nose. So that line right there, a little bit on the sleeve and a little bit on the bottom of his robe. Then I went in and added some light olive green to his hat, a little bit of white in there just to kind of lighten some of the hat up. And I did this kind of to create some wrinkle texture, I suppose, just on the left side. And I'm just doing curved strokes that kind of fade off to the right and just gives it a little pop of lighter color to look at in his hat. Do it a little bit over here on the point part. And then I did a second coat on the other hand that I didn't do a second coat yet. So just that unbleached titanium, and I'm applying that over that area. Next, I'm going to show you the grass texture. So this is a really fun step. So there's different ways you can do grass. I'm going to do it this way with the round brush, but I've done it before with an angle brush. So if you like to use the angle brush, you can use the angle brush. I'm using the number 4 round brush. So I'm making a very dark, watered down green on my palette. So mixing the hooker's green with a little bit of black, water it down slightly. And I'm going to be using my number 4 round brush to start with the first layer of grass, which is going to be nice and dark. So I'm going to start about the level of his feet and do these sort of angular kind of strokes that start at the bottom and sort of wisp away to a point. I'm moving my brush very fast. So I'm starting each of the grass blades from the bottom and I'm stroking up with the brush. Notice that the direction of the grass blades go opposite from each side of the gnome. So these grass blades are swaying towards the left, and you can have them kind of sway both ways. So I changed the angle of some of those grass blades, but most of them are swaying towards the left on the left side, and on the right side they're swaying towards the right. And then in the middle, just under his shoes, they're kind of swaying both ways and overlapping his shoes. And the grass blades are much shorter underneath his shoes, because if I made them super long, they'd be covering up all the shoe and the bottom part of the robe. So I didn't want to do that. And I'm just going to go in and keep adding these strokes of grass blades, kind of forming the whole bottom area of the texture of the grass. The water really helps to thin it down. So when you have thinned down paint, it's a lot easier to flow than if it was super thick and dry and scratchy and not so fun. But I'm going to go ahead and make my second layer lighter. So we started with the darker grass. I'm going to add the light olive green and a little bit of white to my brush and paint some more grass blades that are overlapping those darker ones. So kind of the same thing, they're swaying in different directions. I'm moving my brush super fast. I'm holding the handle of the brush like right in the middle. I don't have my fingers towards the ferrule, towards the bristles. I'm holding it so it's kind of like it helps to hold it that way because your brush can feel looser and create much more looser strokes than if I had my fingers closer to the bristles, if that makes sense. And I'm just going to go in and maybe add some more darker layers in here towards the bottom, and just keep layering your grass until it's nice and full. I can even go in and add a super light layer. So mixing white with that light olive green will create some lighter grass blade strokes in there. And you don't want to cover all of it up. Just a few lighter strokes will create that extra depth in the grass. Next, I'm going to paint the clovers. So I'll be doing that with the 4 round brush. If you find the 4 round too thick for these really kind of intricate shapes I'm going to be doing, you can always find a much smaller round brush to work with, or you can do this with a paint pen. But I'm going to slightly water down my Hooker's Green Hue Permanent. Twisting the brush when you load the paint really helps that paint to kind of distribute to the point of it, especially if we're going to do these smaller detail drawing sort of lines. And then so with the clover, it's basically 3 hearts kind of around the stem shape. So that's what I did here. I did pretty much a heart sticking up straight, and then another heart kind of going horizontal or diagonally, and then another heart. So if you wanted to do a 4-leaf clover, I suppose you can do 4 hearts instead of the 3. And then I did the line that is going down from the shape of the clover, and then I'll paint those in solid after I draw them in. I'm using the Hooker's Green Hue Permanent color to paint them in. Then I'm going to freshen up some titanium white on my palette, and I'm going to do little white clover blossoms, I suppose. That's what they are in the grass, but they're really pretty. So just with the white and the round brush, I'm just doing little clusters of white dots. And then I'm going to go in and make some stems for my little clusters of white dots. So I'm going to do that with the green. I did it with the green and white, but didn't like how that color didn't show up very well. So I rinsed and went ahead and did it with that darker green that's on my palette, that green that's mixed with the black. And then I added a second coat of a lighter color to my clovers. I actually decided just to do the lighter clover, or the lighter side, on one side of each of those heart shapes. So that gives that clover kind of a two-toned look in the leaf color. Next, I decided to do white stripes on the hat. So if you don't like stripes or you don't like these stripes, you don't have to do it. But I did very, very thin, subtle white stripes, and they're kind of going in the direction of the hat. So they're not exactly completely horizontal. They kind of curve with the hat, and then they kind of curve on the tip, the point of the hat. So little tiny curved lines. And then I took that white and added a highlight on that gold piece. So on the upper left corner of it and on the inner vertical part of it. And then I grabbed the gold and I did a second coat of the gold around that square shape. A few more coats of gold on the gold pieces, but we don't need to have a second coat of gold all over that. And then I decided to add some more brown tones to his hands. So a little bit of brown just on the bottom part of the hand area, and then kind of blend it back up with the unbleached titanium color. Then I rinsed and dried and grabbed the titanium white. I did a few white highlights. There's a little mark or a little white curved line on the top of his nose, a few curved lines on the top of the shoes, a little bit on the hat, so just a few kind of loose outline pieces on the left part of the hat. On the left part of the band, I kind of did some strokes on the left part and let those kind of fade away. A little bit on his sleeve and a little bit on the left part of his hand. So don't go too crazy with too many highlights, but just a few to have some areas pop a bit. So next, I'm going to show you how I did the clouds. If you don't want clouds in the sky because you think it's going to be kind of too busy, you don't have to do that, or if you don't like doing clouds, but I'm using this small flat brush. So I think this is a number 10 shader brush. It's about 1/4 inch wide, so you can use like a bright brush or any kind of flat brush. But I'm doing clouds, dry brush style clouds. So I loaded it into the white, so just the tip of the brush in the white, and I wiped it off with the towel. And then I'm painting in these circular strokes to form the shape of the cloud. Now that titanium white is not super opaque or strong, so the cloud should not look super bright white. It should be very kind of see-through. We still see some of that blue still showing through, which is why we wipe off the brush, because if you put too much paint on there, it's going to be super bright. And I'm holding the brush very lightly. I'm applying the paint very, very lightly. I'm not pressing too hard, painting in circular strokes, and you're basically just forming the shape of the cloud. We have the kind of a bumpy shape at the top of the cloud and kind of a bumpy shape on the bottom. My clouds that are higher up in the sky are larger. My clouds that are lower in the sky are smaller. And if you apply the paint and it's super, super bright and too much, you can always grab that paper towel that you have on hand to wipe off your brush. So you don't want a lot of paint on your brush to do this technique. And I'm just going to fill up my sky with a whole bunch of different clouds. We have a variety of different shapes. And if you want your clouds to look like there's layers and depth into it and not so flat like how they look now, we can go in and apply a second coat of white. So I'm grabbing this white and I'm just adding that white. See how much brighter it is? I didn't wipe my brush off that time, so it shows up brighter. But I'm only applying those strokes to the top parts of the cloud and kind of blending it down. If you want to blend it down with your finger, you can, but only applying it to the top. That's going to make it look like those fluffy sort of cumulus clouds. So it's just simply short little rounded strokes on the upper left part of all of the clouds. I'm going to go silent here and just kind of fill up my sky with as many clouds as I want until I feel content with the amount of clouds in the sky and the amount of layers I want to add to my clouds. Next, I'm going to grab my number 4 round brush and I'm going to paint a clover that is sticking out of his hat. So with that darker green, that Hooker's green hue mixed with the Mars black, slightly watered down to have it to flow, and I'm going to draw out the hearts. So the 3 heart shapes in the stem, and then I'm going to go ahead and paint it in. So there's not much contrast going on there because it's a dark green against a dark green background. Later on, after this dries, we can always get some white and use the white to outline some of that shape so that it pops a little bit better. And I am just taking this darker green and painting the top fold part of his hat up here. So right there, making that line to make it look like it's folding. Next, I'm going to grab that black and I'm going to do the little coin shapes inside the pot. So a little bit of black on the tip of the brush, and I'm just kind of outlining not all of these ovals because that would be way too much outlining, but just a few of those to kind of define their shapes a bit. Then I'm going to go in and do the white outlining on the clover. So I know that green's not dry all the way, but it should be workable at this point. So the titanium white, just on the tip of the brush, I'm outlining the outer edge of that and the stem as well, so that'll get that shape to show up a lot better. I can give it that two-tone look with a few strokes of lighter green in there. And then, so I'm going to move on and do our cute little ladybug that's flying in the sky. I love adding ladybugs to St. Patrick's Day paintings because I love the contrast of the red with the green. I think it makes it pop really pretty. So I did one ladybug. If you wanted to do more than one ladybug, you can. I thought about doing one in the upper left area. The upper left area is kind of blank and doesn't really have much going on, but I just did one. So I did the wings with the Cad Red Medium, and I just kind of sketched it out with my brush and painted it in. And then the other part, so the abdomen and the head, those are going to be with the Mars black color. So with the Mars black, I slightly outlined the wings, and then I did the abdomen, little sort of half circle shape underneath the wings, and then a shape. So it's a very cartoonish, not a realistic looking ladybug. And then the antenna, definitely if you need to use that smaller tiny round brush, you can. I didn't switch, I just tried to use that tip to get the thinnest line I could out of that 4 round brush. And then I went in and did the little black spots. Then I took the white and the 4 round brush and did a little bit of outlining on the white to get some areas of this ladybug to pop. So I did it on the top part of his wing, and then I did it on the lines kind of on the inner part of the wing. And I did the trail thing. So it's like a swirly sort of curvy line that goes from the abdomen and kind of curves into the sky. And then I did 2 dots for the eye, but I ended up covering over those dots because I didn't like the eyes. So if you want eyes, you can keep the eyes. I decided to do without them, so I covered those up. And then I made the trail a little bit brighter, so I just went back over that with a second coat of white so that it would show up. The rest of this painting is pretty much a few touch-ups, so I wanted to get rid of this white stripe down here, didn't like it, so I'm covering that up. And then touched up his hand again. And last but not least, I did some touch-ups in the grass. So I did a few more lighter blades of grass on the bottom with white mixed with the light olive green. And so this painting tutorial is pretty much coming to its conclusion. I hope that you enjoy the fourth gnome in the whole series of gnome paintings that I've been doing since the fall. So we have a fall gnome, we have a winter gnome, we have a Valentine's Day gnome, and we have a St. Patrick's Day gnome. And who knows, there may be another one coming soon. Thanks for watching and thanks for painting with me.